You clicked because you're questioning a relationship, whether it's time to hold on or to let go. You're not alone. Emotional attachment, confusion, guilt. These weigh heavy when decisions feel irreversible. The Stoics faced this too. Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca weren't monks removed from society. They were men tangled in loyalty, grief, and duty. In this video, we'll walk through 8 timeless Stoic insights guiding you not toward cold detachment, but toward wise, peaceful release. Pause, reflect, breathe. You're not here to be told what to do. You're here to find clarity. And if you value calm guidance through life's hardest moments, consider subscribing. This channel is built for inner strength, not noise. Number 1. When staying hurts more than leaving. There comes a moment, quiet, subtle, when you realize the warmth you once felt in someone's presence has turned cold. You try to light the fire again, try harder to be patient, to forgive, to remember the better days. But deep down, you sense it. You're not healing in this connection. You're slowly unraveling. The Stoics didn't romanticize endurance at all costs. They believed in honoring your inner peace as much as any external bond. Seneca once wrote, "Nothing to my mind is a better proof of a well-ordered mind than a man's ability to stop where he started." Let that sit for a moment. It's not about quitting carelessly, but about recognizing when further investment becomes self-betrayal. When you stay not out of love, but out of fear. When you sacrifice your mental clarity, your values, your joy, all for the hope that maybe one more effort will fix it. Letting go doesn't mean you didn't love deeply. It means you refuse to let that love cost you your soul. Consider this metaphor. Imagine carrying a bucket of water with a slow leak. You keep walking, losing drops with each step, believing you're still holding on to something whole. But by the time you arrive, the bucket is empty, and so are you. Some relationships are like that. They look full at first glance, but they're draining you with every moment you deny the truth. So how do you recognize this point? You may feel anxious, more than secure, exhausted after every interaction, like you're walking on eggshells, like you're the only one still trying. This is when reflection matters most. Not reaction. Ask yourself, is my loyalty healing me or hiding me from the pain of ending? Here's what the Stoics would advise. Begin by observing, not judging. Write down your feelings or as if they belonged to a friend. Remove the person from the picture. Ask, if this were any situation causing me this much suffering, would I stay? The Stoics believed in using reason to guide action, not emotion. That doesn't mean ignoring how you feel. It means questioning your feelings. Maybe you've convinced yourself that staying is noble, that giving up is failure, that you'd be selfish to leave. But sometimes, staying is the very thing that prevents both people from growing. What if letting go is the bravest act of care? You are not a bad person for needing space. You are not cruel for choosing peace over prolonged confusion. There's a difference between giving up and moving forward. The Stoics saw virtue not in clinging, but in responding wisely to the nature of things. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, adapt yourself to the life you have been given, and truly love the people with whom destiny has surrounded you. But love in its highest form isn't always closeness. Sometimes it's release. And if you need a modern anchor, think of pruning a tree. You don't do it because you hate the branch. You do it because, without letting go, the whole tree might suffer. So ask yourself today, what part of this relationship am I nurturing out of fear? What part am I holding on to, not because it's right, but because I don't want to feel like I failed? There's no failure in ending what no longer nourishes you. Letting go may hurt, but staying when it's time to leave will cost far more. Number 2, you don't own people and they don't own you. You want them to stay, to care as deeply as you do, to choose you like you've chosen them, but they don't. Or maybe they can't, and you're left wondering what went wrong, or worse, what you did wrong. It's here the Stoics speak with unusual clarity. Epictetus reminds us, you are not the master of others, only of your own choices. It sounds simple, obvious even, but think of how often we forget this. How many times have you tried to shape someone else's behavior with your silence, your sacrifice, your hope that they'll notice how much you're giving? We often confuse love with control. We want others to treat us the way we think they should. We expect them to act in alignment with our standards, our definitions of care, and when they don't, we suffer. But the Stoics saw this as self-imprisonment, because if your peace depends on someone else acting exactly as you wish, you've handed them the key to your inner life. Here's a metaphor to reflect on. Picture two birds flying in the same direction. They travel together not because one is caged or tied to the other, but because they choose to share the sky. Now imagine if one bird veers off, and the other panics, circling, diving, chasing, losing its rhythm just to hold on to what's flying away. That's not love, that's fear, disguised as devotion. To live by Stoic wisdom is to accept that people are independent creatures. They have their own minds, their own wounds, their own rhythms. Trying to mold them into what we need only leads to disappointment and resentment. So how do you begin letting go of this illusion of ownership? First, observe your language. Do you think in terms of "they owe me"? Do you feel entitled to their time, effort, or attention? Do you measure their love by how often they mirror your own actions? Love is not a transaction, and it's not an agreement signed in emotional ink. It's a state of being voluntary, evolving, and sometimes expiring. Marcus Aurelius put it succinctly, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury," meaning don't let someone else's choices pull you into bitterness or control. Rise, choose dignity, focus on your role, not theirs. Modern relationships are tangled in expectations. They should have texted back. They should have known I was upset. They should have made time. But should is a rope we tie around their neck and ours. The Stoics teach, drop the rope, free them, and free yourself. This doesn't mean tolerating mistreatment. On the contrary, it means setting boundaries without expecting them to change. Here's how you can begin. 1. Reclaim your sphere of control. You can't control if they stay. You can control how you respond to their distance. 2. Detach with love. You don't need to hate someone to walk away from them. In fact, you can let go because you love yourself enough to protect your peace. 3. Accept emotional asymmetry. Sometimes we love more, sometimes we care less. This isn't failure, it's nature. 4. Stop chasing closure they can't give. Closure is internal. It's the moment you stop needing an apology to forgive. Ask yourself now, am I trying to control someone else's choices or learning to honor my own? Letting go of ownership isn't cold, it's compassionate. It says, I respect your freedom and I reclaim mine. It says I release the idea that love is owed and begin living like love is offered, not enforced. You are not here to possess. You are here to love wisely, freely, and without chains. And sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for someone is to stop expecting them to be who they're not ready to be. Number 3, nature's seasons. Love has cycles too. You feel it before you understand it. That a relationship is shifting, not with a fight or a betrayal, just a slow cooling. The warmth that once wrapped around you like sunlight now fades into something distant. It confuses you. There was so much beauty here. Where did it go? The Stoics, keen observers of life, often turned to nature for answers. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Observe how all things are continually being born of change. The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it. Nature doesn't resist change, it flows with it. Spring doesn't mourn winter's arrival. Autumn doesn't clutch desperately at summer's last rays. Each season gives way in silence and surrender to the next. And relationships, romantic, familial, platonic, are no different. They have seasons, too. What once felt eternal may have simply served its season. And that's not a failure, that's rhythm. Let's look at a metaphor. Think of a tree that has bloomed beautifully in spring. You watered it, nurtured it, admired every leaf, but now the leaves begin to fall. Not because you failed, but because the cycle is complete. Trying to force the tree to keep blooming in winter isn't love. It's denial. Love in its highest form accepts the seasons. So why do we resist this? So much because we confuse change with loss, and we confuse loss with personal rejection. But the Stoics knew what changes was never truly yours. It was given to you for a time, a gift, and like all things in nature, it came with an unseen expiration date. We suffer when we cling to what was supposed to move on, when we force something to stay in summer, even when autumn has already begun. Letting go then becomes not just emotional, it becomes philosophical. It becomes an act of aligning yourself with how life works, not how you wish it worked. Here's how to apply this in your modern life. 1. Name the season you're in. Is this relationship blooming, holding, or fading? Be honest. 2. Stop comparing it to the past. Past joy doesn't obligate future closeness. Let what was beautiful be beautiful without needing it to remain. 3. Let go of permanence as a measure of worth. Just because something ended doesn't mean it wasn't meaningful. 4. Recognize that release is a part of love. When you resist a natural ending, you risk turning love into resentment. Ask yourself, am I holding on because it's right, or because I'm afraid of the stillness that follows letting go? Stillness is not emptiness, it's the quiet before spring returns. Because even winter has a role. It clears the branches. It teaches you what remains when all the leaves fall. The Stoics weren't advocates for emotional coldness. They didn't tell us to never feel pain or attachment. They told us to expect impermanence, and in doing so, cherish what we have more deeply while we have it. Seneca once said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." And we can apply this to love. The one who clings when it's time to let go isn't richer in love. They're more afraid of its departure. If something once brought joy, but now brings confusion. If a relationship once made you feel alive, but now leaves you drained, then it's not cruelty to acknowledge the season has changed. It's courage. You're not turning your back on what was good. You're honoring it by letting it finish its arc, because in the cycle of things, endings are not failures. They're the quiet beginnings of something new, often unseen, often within you. Let it go, let it change, let it end, just like the seasons. Number 4, affection without attachment. You care, you love, but lately it feels like that love is costing you more than you expected. It pulls on your thoughts, clouds your judgment, binds your mood to their behavior. They don't even have to do anything, just the thought of them not texting back, not showing up the way you hoped, and suddenly your peace is gone. The Stoics would gently pause you here, not to tell you to stop caring, but to ask, is your love free, or is it a leash you're holding at both ends? This is where we meet one of Stoicism's most misunderstood ideas, preferred indifference. The concept goes like this. There are things in life that are nice to have, like health, reputation, relationships. The Stoics called these preferred indifferents. They're preferred, yes, but not essential for a good life. They should not govern your virtue, nor your emotional state. You can love someone deeply, but the moment their presence becomes a requirement for your inner peace, you've crossed into attachment. And attachment, unlike affection, always carries fear. A metaphor to ground this: imagine a bird landing gently in your open palm. You admire it, feel its warmth, even love the way it perches close. But the moment you close your fist, try to keep it from flying away, you've lost the very thing you cherished. You don't own it, and you were never meant to. Love, the Stoics believed, should be offered freely, gently, without the desperation to hold on. Epictetus wrote, "When you kiss your child, say to yourself, 'Tomorrow he may die.' It sounds harsh, even heartless, but it's not. He meant, let your appreciation be sharpened by impermanence. Hold everything and everyone with open hands. In modern terms, don't let someone else's presence become the condition of your emotional stability. You can care without dependency. You can offer affection without expectation." So how do you practice this? 1. Pause when the fear arises. Is your anxiety about losing them, or about losing who you are without them? 2. Journal the difference between love and control. Write down your thoughts. Are you doing something because it's generous, or because you hope it'll make them stay? 3. Watch for hidden trades. If I act this way, they'll care more. If I'm more available, they'll be more present. This is not love. This is silent negotiation, disguised as connection. Seneca once said, "He who is brave is free." That includes emotional bravery, the courage to say, "I can love you," without owning you. I can show up fully and still let go if the time comes. Modern relationships often confuse closeness with possession. We use phrases like "mine" or "belong to," but no one belongs to anyone. Even the people we love most are not ours. They're their own, and so are you. To live by Stoic affection is to live lighter. It means being present, not possessive. It means loving without losing yourself. Here are some reminders to return to in moments of doubt. My love is a gift, not a contract. Their freedom is not my loss. I remain whole even when I stand alone. And ask yourself, am I offering love or demanding security? This distinction is subtle, but it's everything. Because when love is free, when it isn't attached to conditions or outcomes, it can breathe, it can grow, and if it ends, you won't collapse. You'll grieve, yes, but you'll know that you loved well without trying to cage what was never yours to hold. So, let the bird fly, let the person be, and love from a place of strength, not scarcity. Number 5, choosing virtue over emotion. There's a storm inside you. You feel it rising: resentment, heartbreak, anger, fear. You replay the conversations. You imagine what you should have said, what they should have done. You want to scream, maybe even beg, maybe walk away and never look back. But deep down, you also want something else: to stay true to yourself, to not become someone you'll regret being. This is the Stoic crossroad: emotion or virtue, impulse or principle. Seneca offers a steadying hand here. No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself. We don't often think of relationship pain as an opportunity for virtue, but that's exactly how the Stoics saw it. A difficult moment, a breakup, betrayal, ghosting, slow, fading love is not just something to survive. It's something to respond to, intentionally, with character, with strength. Here's a metaphor. Picture a river in flood, fast, raging, overwhelming. You can throw yourself into the current and be swept away by it. Or you can anchor to the rocks beneath, letting the water rush around you, but not through you. Emotion is the flood. Virtue is the rock. It's not about suppressing your feelings. It's about not letting those feelings override who you are. The Stoics placed virtue at the center of life. Virtue isn't some outdated word, it's a compass. It means integrity. It means responding to pain with patience, not pettiness. It means choosing calm over chaos. Not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough. Not to retaliate, So how do you do this in a relationship ending or in its slow decay? 1. Step away before responding. You don't owe anyone an instant reaction. The Stoics would pause, breathe, reflect, then act. 2. Ask, what would my best self do here? Not your angriest self, not your loneliest self, but the version of you who walks through life with purpose. 3. Write, don't send. Pour it all out. Say everything on paper, then ask, is this a reflection of me, or just my pain speaking? Marcus Aurelius wrote, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. And this applies especially to endings. The way you leave someone says more about your character than how you began with them. Letting go doesn't have to be dramatic. You don't have to burn the bridge, block the number, or prove you're over it. You just have to return to yourself, to your values, to your internal clarity. A key Stoic practice: repeat to yourself, this situation is not under my control, but how I meet it is. Over time, that phrase will save you from dozens of self-inflicted wounds. When someone hurts you, it's tempting to lash out, but retaliation chains you to them longer. Virtue frees you. It says, I see your actions, but I won't let them reshape me. I feel this pain, but I'll carry it with grace. I lose this relationship, but I gain clarity. And that is not a loss. Ask yourself, am I reacting to preserve my pride, or responding to preserve my peace? There is strength in silence. There is power in walking away without needing to win. There is dignity in closing a door without slamming it. The Stoics didn't tell us to be numb. They told us to be deliberate, to not let our pain be the author of our next chapter. So the next time your chest tightens, your hands shake, your mind floods with what you want to say or do, pause, return to your center, choose virtue, because when you do, even if the relationship ends, you'll walk away without losing yourself. Number 6, detaching with compassion. Letting go doesn't have to be cruel. You don't have to cut someone out of your heart to move on from your life. You don't need to hate them to set them free. But somewhere along the way, we learned that separation must be sharp, cold, angry, that kindness and closure can't exist in the same breath. The Stoics knew better. Epictetus offers a reframe that feels strikingly modern. Remember that you are an actor in a play, which the playwright chooses. If short, then it is short. If long, then it is long. If he wants you to act the part of a beggar, act it with all your skill. And so if your role is to leave someone, leave with all your grace. You don't get to control when the script changes, but you do get to choose how you exit the scene. We often think of detachment from them, but Stoicism teaches us it's really about detachment from outcomes, from the idea that someone must stay, must love us back, must exit on terms that feel clean. Sometimes people linger in our hearts long after they're gone from our lives. That's not weakness, that's memory. Here's a metaphor to sit with. Imagine holding a paper lantern in your hands. You lit it with care, you admired the way it glowed, and now it's time to release it into the night sky. Not because it lost its beauty, but because it was never meant to stay. To detach with compassion is to do just that, to honor the relationship for what it was, not resent it for what it couldn't be. So, how do you do this? 1. Write a letter you don't send. Say everything, the love, the hurt, the gratitude, the goodbye. This is for you, not for them. A ritual of release. 2. Let yourself grieve the dream. Sometimes we're not grieving the person, but the future we imagined. It's okay to mourn a life that never came to be. 3. Make peace with the unfinished. Not every ending has a perfect conversation, a sense of closure, a final embrace. Some stories end mid-sentence. Your peace isn't in punctuation, it's in acceptance. Seneca said, We suffer more often in imagination than in reality, and often our pain doesn't come from what happened, but from what we keep reliving or rewriting in our minds. Detachment doesn't mean deleting the past. It means no longer trying to revise it. It's okay to still care. It's okay to still wonder if they think of you too. But every time you feel yourself spiraling into what if, return gently to what is. And what is true now, you are still breathing. You are still learning. You are still enough, even without them beside you. The Stoic approach doesn't tell you to shut your heart. It asks you to stabilize it, to love fully when you can, and to release gently when you must. Ask yourself, can I let this person go, not because I stopped loving them, but because I started loving myself enough to move forward? This is not about erasing them. It's about not needing their presence to validate your worth. And if you want a parting thought to hold on to, let it be this: you are not letting go of the love. You are letting go of the attachment to how it had to look. Love can remain, even in distance, even in silence, even in the quiet act of wishing someone well while walking away. This is detachment, not cold, not bitter, but clear, kind, and full of grace. Number 7, the mirror of relationships. You think you're here to figure them out, why they changed, why they didn't stay, why they couldn't love you the way you loved them. But what if this ending isn't about them at all? What if it's about what they revealed in you? Stoicism reminds us that relationships are not just emotional connections. They are mirrors. They reflect our values, our insecurities, our attachments, our illusions. They show us not only who the other person is, but who we are when we're with them. Marcus Aurelius captured this insight clearly. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. The people we let into our lives, especially the ones we get close to, often color the way we see ourselves. When someone pulls away, or hurts us, or no longer fits in our story, it's easy to blame. But the Stoic path invites a more powerful question. What is this pain trying to teach me about myself? Because every moment of tension, heartbreak, or unreciprocated love invites deeper self-examination. Sometimes we confuse longing with love. Sometimes we're drawn to people who validate our wounds, not our worth. Sometimes we ignore red flags because we'd rather be chosen than be alone. Here's a metaphor to sit with. Imagine standing before a perfectly still lake. At first, it looks empty, but when the water calms, your reflection appears. Not distorted, not altered, just you. That's what the end of a relationship can become. A calm surface where you finally see yourself clearly. Again. So how do you use this moment to reflect, not just react? 1. Ask what you chased. Were you drawn to their presence, or to the way they distracted you from your own emptiness? 2. Name the patterns. Do your past relationships echo similar themes? Neglect, overgiving, fear of abandonment. That's not coincidence, that's curriculum. 3. Define your values. What kind of love do you truly want? Not the fantasy, but the function. Was this relationship in alignment with that? Epictetus taught, know first who you are and then adorn yourself accordingly. He meant, don't seek in others what you haven't yet clarified in yourself. If you've been bending to please, or shrinking to avoid conflict, or over-functioning to be enough, this is your moment to pause, to ask, who am I becoming in love? And is that someone I respect? It's uncomfortable, yes, but discomfort is not your enemy. Avoiding that discomfort is. Let this heartbreak be the place where clarity takes root, where self-respect rebuilds its foundation, where you begin choosing people not out of need, but out of alignment. And let's be honest, sometimes what we call heartbreak is actually the breaking of an illusion. Not of who they were, but of who we needed them to be. Let that illusion fall, let it shatter, and sift through what remains, not the ruins of the relationship, but the revelations about yourself. Ask yourself, what version of me emerged in this connection, and what does that tell me about what still needs healing? You may discover that your longing came from scarcity, that your tolerance came from fear, that your love came from a place that didn't yet love you fully. This isn't a reason for shame, it's an invitation to grow. The Stoics didn't promise comfort, they promised wisdom through discomfort. So don't rush to fill the space they left. Sit with it, let it echo, because in that silence, your truest voice can finally speak again. Let the relationship reflect what it needs to, not about them, but about you. This mirror, though painful, is a gift, one that shows you not who you lost, but who you now have the chance to become. Number 8, the discipline of grief. Grief enters quietly. It doesn't always arrive as sobs or breakdowns. Sometimes it shows up as stillness, a sudden silence in your routines, a pause before a song you skip, a name you no longer say out loud. It lingers not just in the heart, but in the spaces where someone used to be. The Stoics never denied grief. They didn't demand coldness or numbness. They simply asked, can we grieve? Without being consumed by it. Seneca, who suffered the loss of a son, wrote, "He was mine, yet not mine. I lost him, as one might lose something on loan." To the Stoics, nothing is ever permanently ours, not possessions, not people, not even time. We are caretakers, not owners. And with that mindset, loss transforms from a violent theft into a solemn return. This is the discipline of grief, not to feel less, but to suffer wisely. In modern life, we often treat grief like something to get over. But what if it's not something you overcome? What if it's something you learn to carry with strength and softness at once? Here's a metaphor. Grief is like learning to walk with a stone in your shoe. At first, it feels unbearable. Every step reminds you of what's gone, but over time, you don't forget it's there, you just learn how to walk with it. Your stride changes, your awareness deepens, but you keep going. To live is to lose. To love is to grieve. There is no alternative, only avoidance. And avoidance delays healing. So how do the Stoics help us face this kind of sorrow? 1. Feel fully but don't fuel it. Give space to your sadness. Name it. Write about it. Let it rise. But don't rehearse every detail of the ending in your mind. That turns pain into permanence. 2. Practice perspective. Ask yourself, what did this relationship give me? What did it teach me? What part of me is stronger for having known this person? 3. Grieve what was not, what never became. Much of our pain is not about the relationship itself, but about the future we built in our minds. Grieve the reality, not the fantasy. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do say and think. It's a harsh truth, but also a liberating one. Life is fleeting, so is love. And grief, too, will shift. If you let it move through you, the Stoics would not ask you to suppress tears. They would ask, are your tears a form of remembering or resisting? Sometimes we cry not because we're still in love, but because we're not the same person who loved that way. And that's a different kind of grief, a mourning of self. Let that version of you go too. Not in rejection, but in reverence. Ask yourself now, what does my grief say about what I valued, and how can I honor that without holding on to what's gone? Let grief be a teacher, not just a wound. Let it refine you, not reduce you. Let it show you the depth of your capacity to feel and still remain whole. Because discipline doesn't mean denying your humanity. It means staying upright in sorrow. It means letting the pain be present, but not in control. You are not broken because you grieve. You are becoming in a way that only loss can shape. Let the tears come, let the silence echo, and then when you're ready, take the next step. not away from your grief, but forward with it. You began this journey with a quiet ache, a question that lives in many hearts. When is it time to let go? Not just of a person, but of the expectation, the story, the hope that once held you together. And now, you've seen letting go is not a single act. It is a process, a returning to your center, to your values, to your peace. You've walked through the pain of staying too long, through the illusion of control, the natural cycles of love, the courage to care without clinging, the discipline to choose virtue over reaction, the power of releasing with kindness, the mirror of self-awareness, and the discipline of grief. These were not lessons from books alone. They were insights pulled from the ancient minds of Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca, men who faced loss, betrayal, exile, and longing, just like you. But they didn't let those moments define them. They let them refine them. If you are distressed by anything external, Marcus reminds us, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and you have the power to revoke that at any moment. This is the grace of release, to soften your grip, to love deeply, then let go without collapse, to accept endings not as failure, but as nature's rhythm, and to walk away, not as someone defeated, but as someone who knows that inner peace is never found in possession, but in perspective. Now, the choice is yours. You can hold on to what's fading, tighten your grip, rewind the story, stay in the cycle, or you can exhale. You can honor what was without needing it to return. You can step forward not because the pain is gone, but because you're ready to carry it differently. So ask yourself one last time, what do I gain by letting go? Not of the person, but of the weight I've carried for too long. And if you found space in this journey, if something here helped you breathe a little deeper, then maybe this is the path you were meant to walk today. Stay with that stillness. Let the lesson settle. And when you're ready, return to this space. Subscribe if you feel called, or explore the next reflection. You're never alone in this inner work. You don't need to rush. There's no deadline for healing. Just a quiet invitation to return to yourself, to let go with grace, and to begin again.